Welcome again to South Beach Sessions. Guest today, I did not know that he was this large. I did not know that he was this Cuban. Eric Hosmer from Miami, played with the Kansas City Royals, played with the Padres, played with the Cubs last year, played with the Cubs. And I'm happy to have you here. Just want to talk to you about your journey, what it is that you're doing now, because you've transitioned into a media company, which is what I'm doing, an unusual choice, I would say, for a former Major League Baseball player. But I also want to explain to the audience through your words, because I don't think they necessarily understand just how hard it is to get to where you got to and how hard it is to stay there, and how lopsided, obsessively competitive one has to be to the detriment of other things in order to keep making money when you're fighting other people for money in a hugely competitive world. So thank you for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Being a Miami guy, know all about you. So now moving into this new space after the playing days are over, to be here, to be on this show is a tremendous honor. So I appreciate that. But yeah, like you were saying, it's you know, when you're competing at a level that's the highest level of what you're doing, you have to be obsessive. It's got to be 24/7. Everything that, you know, you're working towards has to be for that, whether it's at home, whether it's at the field and all that type of stuff. So I got to a point later on in my career, the last couple of years, where I was in Boston and Chicago and didn't really have that everyday role as far as playing. So, you know, I found myself having a lot of downtime. I find myself really talking to the younger guys that weren't playing every day, trying to help them as much as I could. So now that the playing days are over, I wanted to do that on a bigger scale, continue to help people, continue to share my insight and my perspective to fans on how the game's going. So a lot of opportunities I'm excited to get into.
Did it make you selfish having to be a baseball player who was consumed with having to be a baseball player?
100%. I think at the end of the day, especially now in my life, I have a son now that's 18 months, and you know, you don't want to take away time from him, but at the same time, you want to give everything you have to your profession, to the game of baseball. And once you start kind of thinking you're trying to divide both and use your time like that, that's when, you know, you can't compete at that highest level, that someone else is going to come and work that hard to take your spot. So to me, the way I value one of these positions and these roster spots, if you're not willing to give all you have for that, then you don't really deserve one of those spots. So I got to a point where my body couldn't hold up to play every single day. I wanted to be at home with my son. I wanted to see him grow. So I'm at a point now where I want to stay involved in the game, but I don't want to be there 8 months every day out of the year. So this kind of makes sense for me.
One of the things that I don't think people understand, because they're watching a baseball game, of what it does to your body, that schedule is an insanity. It's not humanly reasonable to play 162 baseball games, to be at the ballpark for 10 hours a day. What did your body feel like at the end? Just the torque of swinging a baseball bat that many times. Like, what at the end, what did your body feel like?
Yeah, it was hard to get going. It was hard to get going on days, especially getting off the plane. You look at 3-4 hour delay, pick up the game later, finish, get on a plane, go to Minnesota. You got a game in Minnesota today. Those were the days for me that it was really hard, because I wanted to get my body in a position to go get work done, but you got to limit the swings because you want to be fresh for the game. So when it gets to that point, it's hard to work the way you want to work, and it's hard to get everything done in a full day.
But what does hard mean? There's my hard, and then there's your pain threshold hard, and those are different. So when you say hard to get going, what does that mean?
So for me, towards the end of my career, my lower back would get real tight, especially after getting off a plane, sitting on a plane for 3-4 hours. That's the part where it was hardest to get going. It was hardest to warm up, and it was hard to get in the cage and take the amount of swings that I want to take when I want to make certain adjustments. So for me, that was the part where when you can't work the way you want to work, those are stuff that you got to overcome, those little aches and pains, that soreness and all that type of thing. And you throw in different obstacles. It's really cold in Chicago. It's really cold in Minnesota at these places. So it just got hard to really train and prepare the way I wanted to prepare.
When I ask you about selfish, the reason I'm asking you about it, so you were a first-round pick. You have to be obsessive about competing. How did it affect your relationships? And if you're Cuban the way that I'm Cuban, your parents were doing a lot of the stuff for you so that you could make sure to concentrate on the thing that you wanted to concentrate on.
Absolutely. And from a young age, you know, we didn't go on family vacations. We we went out to baseball tournaments on the weekend, and then the professional career when you're coming home for 2-3 months at a time, and the first couple weeks you get to have some off time and all that, but then after, you're right back on that daily grind, that daily schedule of having a routine and getting your body ready, getting your baseball stuff ready, and all that type of stuff. So yeah, it was hard. It was a lot of times where you don't have time for other things, and family wants to, they want to hang out, they want to be there with you, and at the end of the day, you have to separate sometimes because you got to get yourself ready to go compete at the highest level.
Were you an adult before you had a child and got married? Were you a functioning adult, or were you an atrophied adolescent?
I would say, to my knowledge, there were certain parts where I felt like I was a functioning adult. Having a kid my last playing season, I think that really changed perspective in a lot of things. You get home from a 9-day road trip on the West Coast, and your little boy's going to be up at 6:30 in the morning, and you hear him wake up at 6:30 in the morning, and you want to go out and spend time with him, but at the same time, you have to get ready for a game that night. So those were some hard times. Definitely not hard as far as like perspective-wise, putting yourself in these shoes, but to compete at that level and to be fully recharged and ready to go, there's certain decisions that come up like that that's where you start to question certain things about taking this, playing career and continuing it on.
What would you want to share about your parents' story in Cuba and how they got over here, what you know about the sacrifices made on your behalf?
Yeah. So my mother is Cuban. She came over here when she was 9 years old, and just the sacrifices alone, like you said, to be here, to be in America, the land of the free, and to be able to pursue anything you want to pursue in life. So for me, that was something that was huge. And on the baseball side of that, my grandfather, I remember every holiday, every time I was over there, we would watch Cuban American baseball games, the Cuban Professional League. And he would show me highlights of Kendrys Morales. And then about 5-6 years later with the Royals, I got to play with Kendrys Morales. And that connection right there for me was everything, because right when I got on that team, there was 2 guys that were Cuban, Kendrys Morales, Brian Pena. And it felt like I was with my uncles every single day. The way that those guys looked out for me, the way that they just made sure I was good in every aspect of not only the game, but in life, was something that I really just felt comfortable with and appreciated so much. And to me, that really opened my eyes on how strong the Cuban bond is when, Cuban players seek other Cuban players and see those guys in their locker room. The way that they treat them, to me, was something I really idolized about that bond.
What are the things that you remember about veterans doing for you upon arrival that made you feel like you were getting acclimated, or were acts of generosity?
Yeah, just when you play baseball and you get into the professional level, it takes you each level is about like a month or 2 to fully transition and be like, okay, I went through some hard times. Now I overcame it. Now I'm good to go. I feel comfortable here. The big leagues, sometimes it doesn't happen like that. This game is hard, and there's a lot of things that get thrown at you that aren't fair from a business perspective, that, hey, you are the best player here, but you're not going to play every day because of certain situations. Maybe a guy signed to more money, or maybe we want to give this younger guy opportunities. So I think that frustrated me in the beginning, when you feel like you're doing something to a certain level, and these guys open your eyes on how everything runs and how everything is ran. And sometimes it's not going to be fair, but at the end of the day, you got to deal with it. You got to move on and continue to do what you got to do. So I think that was some stuff early on that really helped me out.
Your mother was the oldest of 8 children?
Yeah.
And what was her life like in Cuba? What are the stories like about what her life was like?
She was basically a second mother. She was the second mother to all her younger siblings. And, she would tell me story after story. There was an opportunity for me to go out to Cuba and do some baseball camps out there. And my mother is a super positive person, So when I brought her the opportunity to tell her I can go over there, she was a little hesitant about it at first. So that really made me want to really dig deep into everything about there. And it's something that I really want to go and can visit out there to see how it was, the lifestyle, just kind of get a picture in my mind of how everything was, because I do appreciate the sacrifice at the end of the day, but I think I'll appreciate it that much more when I get to go and see it from my own eyes.
What did she say to you? Because I had a situation like that. ESPN, when the normalization of relations was happening and Obama was going over to Cuba, he was doing so with ESPN, with baseball, and they asked me and my father to go. and we were going to go, but my mother didn't want to go, and then we didn't want to go without her, and she refused to answer the calls of ESPN's president, and that was the end of that. We didn't end up going. You haven't been back yet, and what were the sensitivities for her?
The way that she responded to me telling her I had this opportunity, I can tell that something just didn't sit right with her. And I never really got to fully dissect and ask her why, but to me, just seeing that reaction, I knew there was something there. And watching that game when Tampa Bay went over there and seeing some interactions with the president and people over there, it just didn't seem like it sit right with her. It didn't sit well with her. So,
but she wouldn't also deny you the opportunity to go, right? My mother sort of slithered around that one too, where she wouldn't directly say, I don't want you to go, but the feeling was strong enough that I didn't want to disrespect.
Exactly.
I didn't want her to extend herself so much that I would end up hurting her by accident.
Exactly. And that's what got me thinking, like, later on in life, I need to go there. I want to see what's going on. At this point in time, doesn't feel right. The reaction, like I said, from her, it was something that, okay, we'll get back to this at some point in time later, but yeah, it left me wanting to go there and physically see what's going on over there, because I think that level of appreciation, not that it's not at an all-time high right now, but that's going to open my eyes to a lot more.
Can you tell us sort of what it is that your parents did in the name of sacrifice in order, because it's not just you that got to the big leagues, right? Mm-hmm. All of you did.
Yes. And I mean, as a kid, you don't understand the sacrifice. You just think it's normal. You think that's what's supposed to happen. So now being a parent, understanding that sacrifice, my father was from down here and he was a firefighter for the city of Miami. So to see him get home from a 72-hour shift and gets home at 7 in the morning and I'm going out and I want to go out and hit batting practice or do something, I understand that sacrifice. So the family stuff and to understand my family from Cuba and the sacrifice they had to make coming over here, like I said, really opened my eyes to that, and that's something I'm super appreciative about.
Your father was doing the shifts that were 48 and 72 hours without sleep so that he could be around for the baseball stuff, right?
Yeah, and in the city of Miami, like we both know, you're working. There's not much downtime there. You're getting calls left and right, so yeah, he was getting after it.
What do you remember about his presence at these things? What do you remember about his pushing?
Thinking back on those moments, not one time did I ever see my dad and think he was tired. Not one time did I see him and not think he wanted to be there. So now looking back, understanding what he was going through and how tired he might have been, just, keeps that level of appreciation continues to grow because, these aren't easy. That's not easy stuff that he was doing. It's a lot of sacrifice, and it's stuff that I look back on throughout my playing days and my playing career when there's days where, man, you're tired. You don't want to get up and go to the field and do your thing every day. You put it in perspective, and he was doing this, risking his life daily, to me just going to the ballpark playing a baseball game. So for me, that was just a perspective moment that what you're doing is great. It's fun. So go out there and get that stuff, get your work done. Your life isn't on the line.
How did he help you become tougher?
I think it's more of me just kind of watching him over the years. I don't know if it was one thing or two that he said to me, but watching the consistency of what he was preaching to me every single day. I think that's the stuff that I picked up on. Because
you never saw him break?
No, never saw him break. Saw the composure was always the same no matter what it was, not only in sports as well, but off the field with life. The composure was never the same, or was never different. It was always the same. And to me, those are things that I definitely picked up on.
And you felt what in your childhood? Safe, protected? It felt comfortable? What would you say? Was it pressurized? Like, how did it feel growing up to become a first-round pick? And baseball's hugely important, mm-hmm. and the failures are met with what?
Yeah, the failures they're met with a lot of doubt. And I think when you have that belief in everybody back home that you can do this, and it's not something that they need or we have to do. For me, making the big leagues was a dream, was a goal, but there was never pressure to me that from the family, like, hey, we need you to be here. We need you to do this. So for me, I signed out of high school, got a signing bonus, was able to take care of my family in a way with that signing bonus to put me at a level of not comfort, a little bit of comfort, but at the same time, continue to strive for that work because I was able to help my family in a certain way, and the steps as they get bigger and better, that help can be even more. So for me, it wasn't a pressure as far as we need to do this. It was more of a privilege and something that internally, I always wanted to continue to take care of my family, and that was the motivation to keep going.
You signed about 10 minutes before the deadline to sign, correct?
Yep.
How pressurized was that, or did you know, like, what we were going 10 minutes till the deadline because we were just trying to maximize the dollars, or was it a theatrical thing, or were you torn?
No, I was torn. It was, so back then, the draft, the way it's built up now, there's different rules. So there was an August 15th deadline, and you had to be signed by midnight of that last day leading up to the 15th. So we were at home, and, my father wasn't a huge drinker. He was having a bunch of Coronas that night, and it was about 11:45. And we had told Scott
because he was nervous. He was nervous.
He was super nervous. We had told Scott.
And what's the choice? Take people through what the choice is here. What we're wrestling with.
So it's either sign, go to the Kansas City Royals organization, or I was signed to go to Arizona State, play 3 years of college, then you get drafted as a junior. So if I don't sign professionally, I can't get drafted again for another 3 years. So it's about 11:50, 11:55, and the way they handle negotiations is they don't throw numbers at you; they throw the players. And so Matt Wieters back then was a guy who signed, and he signed for $6 million. And the offer I had was a little bit less than that. So Scott's telling me we want to get Matt Wieters' money. So
Scott Boras is telling you Matt Wieters is a catcher, right? He's a catcher?
Yeah, catcher out of Georgia Tech, signed there.
And he's the top guy, right? You went third, right?
Yeah, so he was actually drafted a couple years before, but when they're comparing what you want as a signing bonus, this is the comparison. So, okay, I'm sitting there, and Scott's like, all right, this is what we're going to shoot for. We'll call you back, let you know how everything goes, boom, boom. So it got past the deadline to about 12:15, and I'm thinking, man, like, I think I just blew my opportunity to play in professional baseball because they haven't called back. I don't know if they got up to that number that we want to get to. So I'll never forget my dad. He's like, hey, let's go walk the dog outside. And you can tell he's nervous at that point. And I'm like, Dad, we got to slow down.
Stoic dad who never he's always showing you calm. He never breaks. He fights fires.
Yeah.
Now he's pounding beers and he wants to go for a walk with the dog.
Yes, right around midnight too. So he's just wanting to get up and talk about some things and all that. But yeah, we end up 12:30, get the call. Hey, the Royals came back. We got Matt Wieters' offer. So then everything happened. Everything went well. Signed, went to professional baseball, got taken off the field about 3-4 days after that because there was some concern of the deal not getting done within the deadline time. So I missed about a week. Everything was fine after that, and then got to start my career.
But were you wanting to go and get the money? Did it matter to you? Did you just want to get along the professional track? Were you not interested in the college experience?
I wasn't interested in school at all. I wasn't a very good student. I wanted to play baseball. I wanted to make my life solely around baseball. And there was a point in time there while we were waiting for Scott to call back that I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, what did I just do? Like, I'm going to be in college. I'm going to have some kind of 9-page paper due in about 2 days that I haven't started on. And I could have had an opportunity to sign for a bunch of money, play professional baseball. So, yeah, there was some nervousness on my end going that I thought I'd ruin the opportunity to sign right then and there.
And at that point in your head, ruin the opportunity because you wanted $6 million instead of $5.5 million. What have I done? Like, what have I done? I don't care whether it's a few $100,000. I want to go play baseball. I don't want to be studying for midterms.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what it was. It was putting my trust into Scott Boras and him telling me, hey, this is what he knew I wanted to play professionally. He knew I didn't want to go to school. So my trust was fully in him. And, thank God he called back and it all worked out because it would have been a different path for me if it didn't, obviously.
Where along the path did you feel like I'm not going to make it to the major leagues? Or where along the path does the doubt exist that corrodes the confidence?
Yeah, so my first year in professional ball didn't go very well. We're in Burlington, Iowa. Coming from Miami, going to Burlington, Iowa was a culture shock for me right away. I had never seen snow until that first year of playing professional baseball. So, I'm used to going out. It's hot. It's baseball weather. Now we get to professional baseball. It's my first 2 months of the season, and we haven't played a game where I can feel my hands. And I'm starting out terrible. I'm having a terrible season or a terrible start to the season. So for me, there was still confidence of being in the big leagues and making it to the major leagues. But at that point in time, I'm like, man, this is going to be a lot harder than I visualized.
And you're just cold.
And it's cold. And we got to a game at we're in Kane County, Illinois. It's about 20 degrees. It's raining. It's snowing. The game gets delayed for an hour, and they're saying, hey, we're going to play this at 8:30. And I'm walking outside. I'm thinking there's no chance we play a baseball game today. And sure enough, we did. And in those conditions, I'm like, man, how am I supposed to succeed if I can't feel the bat and I'm playing in this kind of weather?
Tell me about the culture shock.
It was, I mean, the Midwest is a different area than Miami. It's a different Miami. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of places around Miami that you can go to visit. There's beaches. There's all different type of things. When I go to Burlington, Iowa, there's essentially one place to go to, and it's a huge hotel. It's called Fun City, and they have amusement parks, casinos, bars, all that type of stuff in there. So my Cuban Uncle Joey, comes up for a weekend. And we want to hang out, we want to do our thing, whatever. So me being a youngster, I have a fake ID back in the day. We go into Fun City, which is the place where you can go and all that type of stuff. We go to shoot pool, we're hanging out. About 10 minutes into this, I get, escorted out of there by one of the security guards, and he tells me, hey, you're underage, you can't be in here, you got to go. So from that point on, I couldn't do anything outside of baseball. I was going home, I was playing PlayStation, the other guys were going out, having a good time. So it was, it felt pretty lonely some of those nights.
I was going to say, were you sad? Were you scared? You couldn't have fun in Fun City?
Yeah, no fun in Fun City. But yeah, lonely, man. And just like, man, I got to get out of here. I got to figure out a way to get to another level, to get to another city, something like that. So yeah, there was a lot of nights, man, where you felt like I was missing out on stuff when the other guys were going to do something and I had to stand back. So yeah, there was Burlington was definitely some tough times for me.
Forgive me for placing cultural stereotypes upon you, but I would assume if you are Cuban boy in Miami the way that I know Cuban boys in Miami, you're not an adult when you're getting to professional baseball. You are still a bit of a child.
Yes.
You haven't learned much of anything, and your parents have done a great deal for you so that you can get the things that you want.
Yes.
And so you get there, and how ill-equipped are you for living on your own in a place that doesn't resemble the only place you've ever known your whole life?
Yeah, definitely wasn't ready for that, especially having a Cuban mother. Cuban mothers do everything for their boys. They take care of everything. There's food ready at all times, and my mom would help me get stuff done with my laundry, all that type of stuff. So being a 17-year-old boy going out there and, living on your own, living in a city where you don't know anything around you, certain foods that aren't around you, you're eating stuff that just doesn't taste right, and you're like, man, this is different than home. So that's where, it's at that point in time, you have to find some people that are teammates, friends, whatever, to really lean on. And that's where I had a real strong connection with a lot of the players, a lot of Latino players as well. And that was some of those moments, man. We were 6, 7 people deep in a hotel room. We have a little rice maker there. We're making food for each other. And that's those moments where, like, man, I was like, this feels like I'm at home with my uncles, with my cousins, at a family outing, at a family event, and that brought me a lot of comfort.
The Royals were also, as I recall, pretty Hispanic, were they not? I mean, you mentioned a couple of Cuban players, but I just remember that being a Hispanic team.
Yes.
What did that feel like to you? Like, how was that for you?
It was awesome. It was comforting. Those were my best friends on the team. It was so awesome because when whether it's a hotel room, whether it's a locker room, the Latin guys would always find somewhere to always hang out, be together. And to me, that's what I loved. I didn't want to be by myself. I didn't want to be on my own or alone doing stuff in the room or whatnot. So we would always have that one person that we'd go to their room. There'd be about 7 or 8 guys in there, and we had fun. Whether it was just everyone sitting in there talking, whether it was playing cards or whatnot, we just had fun and that bond. And I think always having that place to go to with those guys really brought me that comfort.
In the minor leagues, though, the Hispanic guys didn't have as much money as you, right? You were the only one with money, I would imagine.
Yeah, so it would be like 8 or 9 of us. We'd go to a grocery store. We'd buy rice. We'd buy some food there. We had the little like pressure cooker, and we go to the hotel rooms. And one of my buddies, Ricolo Rivera, he was a Dominican guy. I would just buy him a case of beer. He's sitting there having a couple beers, cooking food for everybody, and everyone's having a great time.
You were paying for the cook in beer.
Yeah. Wasn't able to buy the beer, but I was able to have someone buy it for us,
right.
Pay him, and that's how we all just found ways to take care of each other.
Where else did the doubt make an appearance after your first year?
So after that first year of professional ball, my second, third year in the minor leagues, I have good seasons, have a good rookie year in the big leagues. The second year in the big leagues, the league really adjusted to me, and I wanted to get off to a good start. I wanted to be an all-star. I wanted to do all that. And about mid-May, I was hitting about 220, had a couple home runs, but nothing really good. And at that point in time, for me, it was like, man, like this year is a failure. I'm not going to make the All-Star game. I got off to a terrible start. You end up playing another 6 months of that year, and you realize how much time is in a full season. So that was a point in time where I was pretty down on myself, but I learned so much from that year because I understood how long a season was, and you didn't need to have, those numbers by May. You can get hot at any point in time throughout the year, and your numbers will be where you want them to be.
What are the first couple of times in the big leagues where you're facing somebody and you're like, I can't believe that dude throws that. What am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah, there was a couple of those moments, and the reasoning being is when you're a position player, there's certain pitches that these guys have that you don't see in the minor leagues. And I remember I was facing Corey Kluber, and he had one strike on me, and he threw me a cutter that started on the inner half of the plate, and I went to swing, and then this thing just kind of sawed me off, and I fouled it off. So then the next pitch, he starts it a little more inside, and he throws a two-seam fastball. So he just goes east and west on me, and I see this thing start, and I'm like, all right, no, I'm not swinging at that. That's going to cut in on my hands. And it just goes like that, freezes me for strike three, and I'm like, okay, it's different up here.
The reason that makes me laugh is that I remember, and it's not the same thing, but you just jostled the experience that ended my baseball career in high school, which is I was facing Bobby Hernandez, somebody who would go on to become a professional pitcher, and I'm down 0-2 and I'm expecting a curveball, and he knows that he doesn't have to bother with that with me, and he just throws a fastball, and it's right, and I couldn't do anything, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. So when you're talking about Kluber moving the ball that way, I don't think people understand how maddening it must be.
Oh, man.
That your success can often depend on a matter of inches, even if you're doing everything right. And sometimes there's a Kluber out there who can do certain things with a baseball that you've not seen before.
Yeah, and that even just that at bat alone got me like my wheels spinning in a whole different direction. So the next time I face him, I'm like, okay, when he throws that cutter in on me, is he automatically following that two-seam? Because if he is and I'm going to swing on it, this is something I got to anticipate before it comes out of his hands. And there was another moment like that in New York when I got to face Mariano Rivera, and we got to a 3-0 count, and the third ball was probably a strike, and the umpire called it a ball, and he kind of looked at the umpire and gave him like a little smirk. And this is my rookie year. So then 3-0 I'm taking, he throws a strike. 3-1, he starts his cutter on the outer part, and it goes over the plate for a strike. And then 3-2, he throws that same pitch, and it breaks even more and breaks my bat and just sheds it to pieces. And I'm thinking, like, this is the best of the best right here. And I don't know what just happened to me, but this umpire just pissed this guy off somehow, and he got nasty on me. But I was like, okay, it's a different level up here.
Can you explain to us what it's like to be obsessive about these things and to have a failure rate that is, 7 out of 10 times, and you're still doing great?
Frustrating. And that's where the hardest thing as a baseball player, you have to learn how to deal with that failure. You almost throughout the course of a season, you want to stack up small wins, because there's times where you just feel so lost up there that it's like, all right, let me just try and swing at strikes today. That's my goal today. I don't care if I don't get a hit or whatnot. I'm just going to try and swing at strikes today. And then if you do that, you feel like you can go on to the next step. So it's kind of like a little small win to get you back to somewhat of a normality in the head and get your headspace back to where it needs to be. So there's a lot of different stuff that you deal with, especially playing a game for so long, your whole life, and you're dealing with certain stuff that you have to make adjustments on, and then you get to the next level, and those adjustments have to change. So that can really mess with you mentally. And there's some things that you just have to ignore and continue to move on and go the way you go about it. And there's certain things that it's like, hey, no, you have to physically make adjustment here and change this. So you have to balance what's worth making the adjustment for, what's not, and you just learn on the fly.
Can you explain to me, as if I'm an idiot or to somebody who doesn't even understand baseball, how would you go about explaining how hard it is to do what it is you did well?
Yeah, so baseball, when you're younger, it's all about velocity, and usually that pitcher has that one breaking ball that can really, really put you away. So you're basically asking, how hard does this guy throw, and what's his breaking pitch? And baseball back in the day, if you didn't swing at that 0-0 breaking ball, 1-0 when you're ahead, 2-0, these are counts where you're going to get fastballs. The game now has transitioned into a way where there's pitches that compensate that 2-0 count where you should get a fastball. Then now these guys have cutters, these guys have split fingers. A lot of these starting pitchers, their arsenal is 5-6 pitches deep. So it's no longer how hard does this guy throw and what's that breaking ball like. there's so much different spin and so many different pitches these guys can throw at you. You really have to break down that report and understand, all right, when this guy's behind in the count, he likes these pitches. When he's ahead in the count, he likes these pitches. So there's a lot of pre-planned game plan that you have to go in knowing what you're going to, whatever your plan is for that day, how you have to execute.
Who awed you?
From a pitching standpoint?
Anywhere. Just teammate, just skill. When you said Kendrys Morales, I thought to myself, when I first saw that guy play, I was like, I mean, good God.
He awed me in a way of looking for something that I didn't know you can look for. Kendrys would be the first one to get to the field every single day. He would love his rice and beans, and he would make a big plate of Latin food, go down to the cage, and he would have a computer here, and it was the pitcher we were facing that day. And it was all his fastballs and all his breaking balls on both different screens. And he would just play them both and watch for something different to pop out. So he would get me over, and all the guys would call me Boppo. He'd be like, Boppo, Boppo, bang, bang. And he would show me the video, and he would say, all right, look, his hand on this pitch when he throws a fastball is here, and then his hand goes below his belt or below the logo here when he's throwing a breaking ball. So he taught me to look for certain things that pitchers have tips and tells on something I had no idea to look for, and that really opened my eyes as well.
And who else awed you? Like, who were you thinking of? When I say awed, just where it can be somebody you're facing a childhood hero, somebody you grew up watching, just anybody, anything that conjures for you the feeling of awe.
Yeah, when my first game on the road was at Yankee Stadium, so getting able to see Derek Jeter, I had always idolized Derek Jeter just for the way he handled himself on the field, off the field. So to be able to play against him, to hear them announce his name, and he comes to the bat, and I'm at first, and just to have that moment right there was an in-awe moment for me.
Did you rehearse what you were going to say to him when he got over and stood next to you?
I was thinking of a couple different things, but I'm like, no, that's not going to work, or I don't want to say that to him. I don't want him to think I'm some, young kid that's saying something like this. But no, I definitely was nervous, and I don't get nervous, in front of many people, especially on the baseball field. But he was a guy that I try to imitate a lot of things he did, and when I got up to him, or when he got up to first base, it was a starstruck moment that I just really didn't know what to say. It was lost for words.
When you mention the Yankee Stadium for the first time, can you take me back to a time, any time that you would associate most with positive feelings in baseball? I mean, obviously, when you're celebrating victories of the highest order, but just where you're living your dreams and they're better than what you even imagined when you were a child dreaming them.
Yeah, so Yankee Stadium is where I hit my first home run. So I just remember being in New York, being on the opposing team, hitting a home run. The crowd's obviously not happy. Everyone's sitting down. They throw the ball back. And I'm rounding second, and right on the third baseline is the family section. And I remember hitting second base, being able to look up and see my uncles, my parents, my cousins, everybody there. And it just seemed like we had taken over that whole entire stadium because the whole crowd's sitting down. No one's clapping. No one's saying a thing. And my family is in the family section there standing up. And that's all I see rounding second base. So for me, that was a moment of man, like this is really happening right now in Yankee Stadium, a stadium I idolized playing in, a team I idolized. I was a Yankee fan growing up. And as you know, down here, the Marlin games it was a different atmosphere. They always had good players, never really sold out the stadiums on a regular season game. So to be able to go up to Yankee Stadium as a kid, which was the first stadium outside of Marlin Stadium I'd been to, just opened my eyes to baseball being at a different level, the atmosphere, all that type of stuff. So that was a surreal moment.
Were they close enough and was it quiet enough that you can hear your family, or were they not that close?
They weren't that close, couldn't hear them. I can definitely see them, but the family section in Yankee Stadium is the second level on the third base side. So I definitely saw them. And when I hit second, like I said, I looked up and it was just the Hosmer family up and going at it, which was cool.
What are some of the moments that fill you with sort of an emotional gratitude? Is there any place along the path? I would imagine this might happen later in life as you develop some wisdoms and some age. But what are the moments that you would think of now if I were to ask you, have you ever cried on a baseball field? Just grateful for the opportunity to live the life you want to live.
Yeah, certainly. This past year was a big one for me, getting able to have my son be at the field and then bring him in the locker room and just trying to show him my world. When we won the World Series, there's a picture So we win the World Series in Citi Field.
I can't believe you won that World Series, by the way. I still can't believe the Kansas City Royals won the
Should have
World
won in
Series.
14, but yeah, it didn't happen. Went back in 15, we did. So there's a moment in 2015 where the families are coming on the field after we win, and my mom and dad roll up in Citi Field, and they're on behind home plate, and a security guard, my mom gets through, a security guard stops my dad and says, "Sir, you can't come on the field right now. This is it." And my dad just kind of looks at him, gives him the FU with his eyes, and comes on the field. So to have that moment with my parents, my mom's breaking down crying, and there's a picture of me and my mom where I'm giving her a hug and she's just crying like this in my arms. For me, that just brought everything full circle. The sacrifice we talked about, the sacrifice they made for me to be able to pursue this in a career, that all just came full circle at that point in time. And that's a picture that I always have with me in my phone, in my house, and I catch myself staring at that picture just thinking of a lot of good things.
What are the landmarks you remember from that season? Like, what are the take us through the journey of that? That had to be the most fun you've had in baseball at any level, right?
Oh, no question. So 2014, we lose the World Series. We sweep the whole entire American League. We lose the San Francisco Giants. Madison Bumgarner wins like 3 of the 4 games in the World Series.
Nasty.
Just nasty. I mean, coming in every game, he's doing his thing. Then the 15.
Unreasonable. The whole thing unfair. The whole thing unfair.
We went from, in 2014, thinking, man, I don't know if we can make the World Series, to getting there, sweeping the American League, thinking there's no way we're losing this now. This is our story. Lose. 2015, got a lot of the same guys back. We roll through the whole entire season. We win the division. First series, we have the Astros come in off the wild card game. The team that comes in off the wild card game comes in with a lot of momentum. They come in hot. They come beat us game 1. We're down 2-1 in Houston. They're up like 5-1 in the 8th inning. We're thinking we're going home at that point in time. We pull off a huge comeback, end up beating them in the 5th game, all the way, beat Toronto the next series, which if we don't have home field advantage, in my opinion, I don't think we beat Toronto. Then we get to New York, and I think we beat New York pretty easily there. And that was kind of that rundown of that 2015 year.
Do you have to pay for your own drinks in Kansas City? Like, it's like, for how long did you go where anywhere you would go in Kansas City, everything was taken care of?
Yeah, so I played there another 2 years after we won, and it was like that for everybody. Any restaurant you went to, they took care of you. Somebody in the restaurant took care of us. It was unbelievable. I've only been back one time since. I was supposed to go back with the Padres in 2020. The schedule got moved around. We ended up staying on the West Coast for a majority of the schedule, so that never happened. And then 2022, the year I got traded, we were supposed to go there about 2 weeks after the trade deadline. I get traded to Boston. The first series in Boston, I have to meet the team in Kansas City to play there. So was there for about 2 days. Everything was on the fly. It's fun to be back, but I still feel like I really haven't been able to go back and spend some time with the people there, which I will this year, and I look forward to it.
During the postseason run, though, you're walking into any restaurant and it's standing ovations, correct?
Yeah, and it's flattering. It's uncomfortable at the same time. You're walking into a place and everyone stands up and starts clapping for you and is looking your way. But at the same time, there's such an appreciation there because Kansas City, not the biggest market when it comes to fans. So the bond that we had with the fans out there, I mean, every time we won a playoff series, we were all going out. We told the fans where we were going. We get to enjoy some time with them. So it was a unique bond that we had with the city of Kansas City.
I was talking to J.J. Redick about this recently. I have yet to meet an athlete who doesn't struggle with the transition into retirement and the grieving, the burying of what used to be his identity. You're still a young man. You're in your mid-30s, and you're working all your life toward being this one thing. You achieve it. And then in your mid-30s, unlike in most professions, it's done, and you've got to put it away. It becomes difficult for the entirety of the family, for the people who love you. What was it like for you?
It was different. It was, from 2022 to the end of my playing career, I had been traded a couple times. I had to move my family probably about 6 or 7 times. So we would come home in Miami with the offseason. We went out to San Diego, got traded to San Diego, then went to Boston. Get to Boston, have a baby, stay there for the offseason, sign with the Cubs the next year, go to Arizona, get to Chicago. Then I get released in Chicago, and we're stuck in Chicago. Not stuck, we're in Chicago for another 4 or 5 months until we go home. So at that point in time, that's when it really started to get difficult. I was in Chicago about June till whenever we got home for winter. And it's like, man, like, what am I going to do right now? I want to be involved in the game. I want to find somehow to stay in the game. And guys that retire always say, if you want to stay in the game, don't go too far for too long because it'll be hard to get back in. So I just kept thinking of how are ways I can stay in the game, how are ways I can continue to reach people in the game and outside of the game that enjoy watching. And this is where the Moonball Media idea came in and the podcast of Digging Deep. And that's kind of how I started to really feel like I was using my time wisely, was because all that time in Chicago, I had been preparing and trying to visualize what this could be.
But you're still in the middle of it, right? You're still processing this. I asked the question as if you had already solved it. You're in the middle of transitioning.
Yes, yes.
Are you getting help? Are you asking for advice? Are you acknowledging that it's a turbulent thing for any human being? Because there's something about I'm not going to just say baseball players, but athletes. You have to concentrate so much on the thing that it can get in the way of your introspection. You're not thinking about the end. You're never thinking about the end.
Yeah. It's a different thought process because even in the off seasons, I would always have to be ready to go do my baseball stuff. Hey, I can go do this, but at the end of the day, I got to make sure I get a workout and go hit and do all this type of stuff. To not have that is something that I'm like, man, like, what am I going to do if I don't have to do that?
The structure is also helpful, right? The
Yes.
structure of just, that's one of the things that jars people. I don't have to be someplace at a time. I've been on a
Correct.
schedule for I don't know how long. Now there's just sort of a vast roaming emptiness.
Yes, and that structure, like you're saying, was everything. That's how baseball, that's how athletes are wired. You have that structure. You know where you need to be. The days you don't have to do something is an off day. You kind of use that as a down day to recharge, and then you're right back to that structure. So that's what I'm trying to create now and trying to feel, where can I really help? Where is my purpose for all this? And that's where now, we're trying to grow and continue to grow as a media company, as a podcast, and find ways to find those answers, to talk to guys that have gone through the coaching stuff or gone through their playing careers and stopped and have gone through all that experience. So we're trying to really hit home and understand how to make that transition. And that's something that I have had to lean on a lot of people.
Why a media company?
So there was a couple different points in time throughout my career that I felt like I wanted to tell my story. I wanted to tell the situation on my own, and I didn't have those opportunities. When I was in Kansas City, I wanted to sign back there. I wanted to be a Royal for life. I didn't have that opportunity to sign back there. I think a lot of the fans thought that I didn't want to go back there. So that was one time where I was like, man, I wish I had something to tell my story and to tell people what really went down. Another way, in San Diego, I get to San Diego, I sign a big contract. I don't perform the way I want to perform. There's a lot of heat that's coming from me, from the fans, from other people, from media there. And then the conversation became that I was tearing certain things up in the clubhouse. I wasn't doing stuff that I should. I wasn't leading the way that I should. And that was another situation where I'm like, man, I really wish I can tell my side of this story. I really wish I can share to the people my perspective and let that happen. And last year, a good friend of mine, Manny Machado, same thing. He's in San Diego. They don't make the playoffs. They have a great roster. Big article comes out on Manny being the reason of them not making the playoffs. And that's where I'm like, okay, this is where I want another opportunity to be able to share some of my insight of seeing what Manny does behind the scenes. And that's really how this all came about.
What were you accused of doing in the clubhouse? You were tearing the clubhouse apart with what?
Just not being a good clubhouse guy, really dividing the team and not doing what I was supposed to do to bring the team together, which just wasn't true at all.
That had to be bothersome.
Big time. And if you're not performing the way you should and people are talking about that, I completely get that. That's, part of what comes with that. And I'm with that. All of being an athlete, signing a big deal, that's the stuff that comes with that. But then when you take it a step further and talk about what kind of teammate, what kind of person you're being, that's when it's like, okay, I really want an opportunity to explain my side of this.
Why didn't you end up being a Royal for life? What are the parts of that story that have not been told?
Yeah, so different ownership now, but we got to a situation where there was two teams in on me in free agency, the Royals and the Padres, and we got to a point where we wanted to, get whatever we can get out of both teams. And the offers were pretty much the same up until a point where Kansas City called back and said, hey, listen, we're not going to do certain deals over 5 years anymore. The owner caught wind of what was happening. We're not going to do this anymore. we're going to go back on our deal, and this is the different side of it. So at that point in time, I'm trying to do what's best for me and my family. There was such a big gap in the financial part of it that I just couldn't sacrifice that for my family, so I ended up signing out in San Diego.
Do you regret it? Was it the right decision?
It was the right decision, absolutely. I don't regret not one part of it because that was the situation I had, and I had to pursue that. And I enjoyed my time in San Diego. I enjoyed the teammates out there. I enjoyed people out there. And it ultimately just came down to the fact that, stuff was done a certain way, that there were certain times that the team, the group of guys felt like that wasn't the right thing to do for the team. And I was that voice to go and talk to whether it was the manager or management up top and say, hey, listen, we can't do this. We need to do this a certain way, or we should do this a certain way. And ultimately, it just wasn't a good working relationship, and they decided to move on.
Give me an example of when it is you're going, like when you're being a legitimate organizational leader, when you have to take something to the top on behalf of your constituency.
So take a guy like Manny Machado, for instance. This guy has been playing in the big leagues at the highest level for 10 plus years. When the manager comes down and says, hey, instead of batting practice, the traditional pitcher throwing or a coach throwing you batting practice, we're going to take batting practice off a machine. We're going to take batting practice off a machine throwing about 95 to 100 miles an hour. We want you guys to see what you're going to see velocity-wise, the same as the game. We want it in practice. That's what we're trying to go for. And a guy like Manny Machado is saying, I've been doing this a certain way for 10 years. I need to make sure my rhythm is good, and I need that BP pitcher to throw me balls so I can make sure I'm ready to go to face this pitcher at night. He doesn't have that decision because we are now coming with an organizational rule of stuff having to be done a certain way. So when stuff like that happens, the players start talking. A lot of guys don't agree with it. There's someone that has to go and explain to these guys, hey, maybe we shouldn't have this for certain people. And ultimately, that just never got to the point where, we had a good working communication line.
So what happened? You go up there, you start telling them this, and you're saying, get the hell out of here. We're not interested in your opinions on these matters. If we wanted the opinions of the players, we would have asked you.
Yeah, I think it got to a situation where there were certain managers in there that didn't have the authority to decide on how we were going to do it. So when that message gets to them, they return and deliver the message up top. And ultimately, it never happens. So you never really get to go up top and talk to the person you want to talk to change. You need your manager to do that for you at the end of the day. And it just got to the point where it was always button heads on some kind of end. And it was just a back and forth a lot that we never really got to resolve.
What do you recall as the unhappiest you were playing baseball? Any level, professional or otherwise? Just, I imagine this is tied to struggles. I imagine if you're playing well, there isn't very much in the way of unhappiness.
Yeah, definitely. And the year that I got traded in San Diego was definitely the toughest on me. It was the toughest, like I said, on my family. We moved to a bunch of different cities at different times. And the hardest part was it was about the second year that I was, involved in all these trade rumors. Each year the trade deadline comes. That's the talk for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so. You see names pop up. They're going to try and get rid of this guy. They're going to try and get rid of this guy. That became really difficult for me because you're walking into the clubhouse, you're walking into the food room, there's TVs everywhere, people are having conversations, and all of a sudden you walk into the room, the conversation's kind of shut down, and it's the guys having respect for me, don't want to talk about what's happening or don't want to talk about what's on the TV. So at that point in time, it just felt like I had become a distraction, and that's the last thing I wanted to do was have me be a distraction to the team, to what we're trying to accomplish here. So at that point in time, there was a lot of hard conversations that happened with me and the general manager. And at that point in time, I was like, man, we just got to do something here. If I'm going to be a distraction, I don't want to continue to do this.
How hard is baseball on your wife?
Very hard. I think that's something that nobody really takes into consideration. I know now Francisco Lindor's wife had just put out something, how she's receiving certain death threats. She's receiving certain, certain things from fans about her child, her children. So that can be hard. I think that's something that the wives, they all try and internalize, especially with my wife. She doesn't want me to know that she's going through that. So she really tries to hide that from me. And at certain points, stuff gets too hard that she just can't hide certain things.
Like
whether it's being talked about, being traded in the trade deadline stuff, having certain fans say something to them at the stadiums. There's a bunch of different examples that can happen.
Well, but how about the moodiness of her husband? How about her husband bringing work home with him because he's hit the ball hard 5 days in a row and he's 1 for 17?
Yeah, and that stuff for me was hard to talk to her about because I would always tell her I need to talk to somebody that knows what I'm going through, that can relate to what I'm going through, and she just wants to help, and she just wants to be there to do whatever she can to help me. The way we're wired, that's still what you're thinking, and you can tell that's on the other person's mind. So, yeah, it is hard. It's very hard.
What are you trying to do with digging deep? You said staying close to baseball, but what are you trying to accomplish? What are the conversations you're trying to have, and why do they matter?
Yeah, I think it's a unique perspective that we're in because I think player to player having that conversation brings a lot of comfort to players. I think players want to say certain things and baseball players don't want to say certain things. But in my opinion, baseball is the last of this player-driven media. So player-driven media, as far as I can share my perspective on certain ways guys prepare, on certain things that happen in the game. So the digging deep aspect of it is we can go deeper into guys' stories. We can figure out adversity, times that were tough, how they responded, go that route with it. Now with Digging Weekly, we're going to talk more about the game, share insight on what's happening, certain plays, certain decisions that are being made. That's more of the in-season kind of comment on certain things that is happening. So a lot of different ways that we're trying to reach the sports world.
How have you gotten good at failure?
I guess just failing over time and just learning how to deal with it,
I've failed so much that it's old hat to me.
You're just used to it at that point. But I think handling failure, especially while still playing, that's what helps the most is having guys on your team that you really enjoy being there. You enjoy competing against, because when you can all kind of sit back at the end of the game and you can laugh at yourself and you can kind of openly joke about something you didn't do well that night, really helps. Where it gets tough is when you feel like you're on a team that, you don't really connect with a lot of people. You're kind of wearing all this stuff on your own and you go back to your locker. It's just you there. You don't really want to talk or say anything to anybody. That's, for me, fortunately, I've never been in that situation, but I know that's where it can get real tough.
I have a hard time treating failure as learning. To me, it just ends up feeling like failure. When I'm in it, I don't have a lot of success turning into the rosy positive side of it. It just feels like failing, and then I become very hard on myself.
Yeah, and it's, there's a guy, Justin Sua, he's the co-host on Digging Deep, and a lot of people say you win and you learn, and he says he hates that because you learn from both. And why can't you learn from both? Because, when you lose, you want to sit there and figure out why, what happened. But when you win, you just kind of go about it. You go grab your meal, your victory beer at the end of the day, and you go home and you never reflect on, what got you there and all that type of stuff.
What did baseball teach you about life? Like, it's a broad question, but how did baseball make you better at handling things away from the diamond?
Just handling failure, handling how to grow up, perspective, all different type of things. And I think what was really cool for me was towards the end of my career, getting to play on different teams. I got to see a lot of guys I've idolized and or admired and played against throughout the years, and I got to see their process. I got to see their routines. I got to see how they handle certain things, especially towards the end of my career going to Boston and being a huge market, being, the center of the baseball world, and that could be a tough fan base, but seeing how the Rafael Devers, the Xander Bogaerts, how they go about it, not only the good stuff, but at the hard times as well, and how they handled this situation was a cool perspective for me because I got to see a lot of those guys behind the scenes when I never really got to see that.
Did you enjoy the enjoyable moments enough, or in retrospect, do you wish you had savored them more because you were so busy being competitive that the joy sort of got squeezed out of it because the next day's pitcher was going to be tough to face too?
Yeah, and certainly when I look back on the 14 and 15 season in Kansas City, that's something you look back on and you take for granted. You think you're going to be there your whole career with that group of guys, and then all of a sudden 2 years later, that whole entire roster is on different teams. So I definitely think looking back, those were times where, I think I took that a little too for granted too much. If that was something that I really could have sat back and enjoyed each day and really understand what we're accomplishing, I think that's something that I look back on and was like, man, those were times that I really wish I could have reflected and went back and enjoyed each moment more.
Did family members each react differently to you retiring, or was there a sameness to whatever the emotions were around you telling them that you weren't going to do it anymore?
Yeah, it was different for some. My family, whatever time my game is, that was what their schedule revolved around. They were going to watch the game that night. Even if it was on San Diego on the West Coast, they're taking a nap in the middle of the day, making sure they're up at 10 o'clock to watch those late games. So that was the hardest part, is telling some, especially my grandfather, people, I was telling him that, I was retiring, and you can just see like that daily entertainment of him watching the game and keeping up with the team. He's not going to have that anymore. So that was hard for me to see certain reactions when telling family I was done
so
playing.
your grandfather was crestfallen because he wasn't going to get his 6:40 games anymore. He had his schedule late at night. He got to watch his grandson play, and you took it away from him because you're an asshole.
Yeah, because I want to go start a podcast. Look at me.
That's right. So you took that away from, you said his name is People. You call him People.
Yeah, Henry, we call him People. So yeah, he was, and you can just see the look in his face when I told him. He was like, hey, what are you going to do? You're going to be done, or you keep playing? And I said, no, People, I think I'm done. And you can kind of just see the sink in his body language that, man, like, I don't have a team to follow. I don't have anybody to watch every night. So that was tough.
What a joy, though, to be able to give that gift to the people who love you.
Yeah, it was. And it was so fun because every time we'd come back to Miami to play, all the families out there, and to see them interacting with teammates. My teammates had gotten to know them at certain points in times, the guys that I played a couple years with. So just to have that bond with everybody after the game in the family room, getting to see everybody bond with teammates, different players, different family members, that's stuff that I'll miss for sure.
I got to imagine that the degree of difficulty is something that you're going to miss. There's not going to be anything that resembles that challenge the rest of your life, right?
I mean, not that you would think, and baseball, it just kept you guessing the whole time because the game continues to get harder. The pitchers find ways to get better. They find ways to throw new pitches. So, yeah, I don't think there's going to be anything that's this challenging. Maybe there will be. If there is, I'm unaware of. It just kept you coming back for more. It kept you hungry. And you never in baseball feel like, man, I got this figured out. I'm good. I can just coast from now.
It has to be so strange, though. It really does, to find yourself in a position where nothing that you do the rest of your life will probably ever feel like Yankee Stadium did when it's full of people and you're at the height of conquering the degree of difficulty that you're conquering.
Yeah, and, I haven't had many, man, I miss it moments when opening day happened. It was the Padres and Dodgers in Korea. I'm watching the game, and Manny hits a home run to left field, probably about 500 feet. Hits his bat, he just drops his bat and stares at it, and I'm like, okay, I miss that feeling. When you can drop the bat, run around the bases, feel like a superhero, I do miss that feeling. And I don't know if there's ever going to be a feeling that can match that, but that was the first time where I'm like, man, this is going to be different because I'm not going to experience that kind of feeling anymore.
Is there any one of those that tops the initial one at Yankee Stadium? Like the one feeling that you associate with, I dropped my bat, I'm the strongest person in the world?
Winning the World Series. I remember standing at first base, and Wilmer Flores was hitting. There was 2 strikes, and he fouled about 3 pitches off, and I just kept pinching myself like we're 1 strike away from winning the World Series. And the strike happened. I throw my glove up in the air, scream as loud as I can, and for me, that is a feeling that will never be matched, and that's something that I'll probably never experience again.
It has to be strange to you as well, just in the lifespan of your career. You've gone from seeing pitchers be nasty. I remember talking to Mike Lowell about this one time, and he's talking about you don't understand the difference between 92 and 96. 92, you're like, I'm on it. 96, you're like, whoa, I got to speed up my bat some. But now it's everybody out there is throwing 100.
Everybody. I remember there was something that someone came out with, said there was over 100 minor league pitchers throwing over 100 miles an hour. So the game has certainly gotten tougher. Like we've said, these pitchers, they've found ways to adapt and make their stuff more nasty. There was obviously the sticky stuff that went on throughout a point in time, and that's really where it was like, all right, this is different because I've seen guys I've been facing for 4 or 5 years, and I know their arsenal well. I know their stuff. I know I can handle them. All of a sudden now they have gotten so much better. Their arsenal has gotten so much better because they just continue to adapt. They can continue to learn new ways. They continue to learn about their pitches, so the game is not getting any easier.
It's a bit of a mind fuck, though, to have you aging, so your skills are diminishing some, And what keeps replenishing on the mound keeps throwing the ball harder and harder. Like that's you can feel your window closing.
Yes, and you know that you have to now start to that anticipation of that front door two seam that we were talking about. You have to do that a lot more. You have to use your experience to understand, okay, he's going to come with this pitch. I need to cheat a little bit and get going. Cheating meaning if he releases the ball now, I'm seeing it and go. As soon as he's about to release the ball, I got to start my go because I can't catch up to it normally. So that is very frustrating.
Did you feel the diminishment happening? Like, did you feel, obviously, in your mid-30s, you're not in your prime anymore. Very few players improve after 30 years old. I think Paul O'Neill is one of the rare ones, but you don't get a lot better after 30 usually.
Right.
So could you feel it happening?
Yeah, I felt it this year or that last year in Chicago. I definitely did. The first couple games of the year, we're playing in 30-degree weather. We're facing, Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff, two of the best in the game. And like we said, I had to find myself in those opportunities to where, all right, a fastball's coming here. We got to swing a little earlier. I got to know that I got to anticipate this pitch and cheat a little bit. That's when I was like, okay, it's not as easy as it used to be able to see the ball out of hand, react, and swing and go from there.
Are you telling anybody or are you alone with it?
No, you're alone. You just got to kind of figure out. That's where you can then lean on some of the older guys with experience. Luckily in Chicago, I had a guy like Mike Napoli who had been through the game. He had been through the later parts of his career, and that's the stuff that really helps. And it's like, all right, maybe now we got to do a little more beforehand on looking up certain tendencies of pitchers so you know when to anticipate those certain pitches.
When you say it's not as easy as it used to be, when was it easiest?
Easiest as far as just being able to know I can fire off my A swing and catch up to this velocity. I can see the ball out of hand, make a decision, all while pulling off my A swing. That is what I think when you become an older player and you can't work the way you want to work and your body's not allowing you, you then have to get to that point where you got to anticipate a little too much.
But when was it easiest? Like, when is it that, what's the time period that it's never easy, right? It never felt easy. You were never so confident that it ever felt easy because surely the game humbles you at every turn. You're not even allowed to feel that, are you? You're never allowed. You can feel like you're hot, but you're never allowed to feel like it's easy.
Never, no. And I think you get to a point in your career where you have enough of a dialogue against a pitcher that you faced him enough times that you know what he's going to attack you with. So that's what I would say, that the game has now become a little bit easier in a way that you know what you're going to see that night. Whether it's a certain pitch, a cutter, a curveball that he's going to continue to throw to you, you know what you have to do in your work leading up to the game because you know what pitches you're going to see.
Do you have another pitcher, not unlike that Rivera story, where you're up there and you're like, this isn't going to go well for me. Like, I kind of know this isn't going to go well for me.
Yeah, and it's a pitcher that I surprisingly had good numbers off, Chris Sale. Every time I face Chris Sale, he's a lefty, looks like Randy Johnson. He's throwing at you from an angle. The ball looks like it's coming from first base for a lefty. We're facing him opening days in Chicago. It's cold, and I'm just looking at the big board, seeing who you're facing the next day, and you see Chris Sale tomorrow. You just know it's not going to be an easy day. I've found a way to have some good success off him. I don't know what that was, but that was a pitcher where it's like, this is going to be a tough day at the yard today.
Did you have a lot of teammates or any that you actively disliked, that you had trouble sharing a clubhouse with?
No, I got along with pretty much everybody. You're going to have some moments where, hey, you got to lock a guy in every now and then, but never had moments where I'm like, this guy sucks. I don't want anything to do with this guy. I've been fortunate to have some good teammates, some good older guys that have showed me some good experience and knowledge they shared with me, and good younger guys that I've gotten to share that knowledge with, and they're hungry, they want to work, and they want to be the best they can be.
What do you do in parenting specifically to do it differently than you felt from your parents? Is there anything that you learned not to do from your parents because you didn't like how it felt?
That's something I think about a lot, and that's something that, I want to have an open dialogue with my son, whether it's, if I ever dated a girl in high school, if I dated a girl outside of or after high school, I never really told my parents. My parents only knew about Casey, my wife, when we started dating, and that was it. So that's the stuff that with my son, that I'm like, okay, am I going to have more of an open dialogue here? Is he going to be able talk to me and lean on me about certain things, but that's stuff I go back and forth with each and every day.
Why is it that you and your dad didn't talk about that stuff? Or like, what is it that you're thinking of there that you would have liked to have had?
Just, yeah, like you said, my dad's a hard-nosed, blue-collar guy. He doesn't talk about feelings. He doesn't talk about certain things. Huge fan of your father, by the way. I got to watch him a lot on Highly Questionable, all that type of stuff. But yeah, it's just a different time. It's a different day and age now.
But did he tell you that he loved you?
He told me that he loved me. Yeah,
did he tell you he was proud of you?
Yeah, he would tell me.
All right, so
you
were getting some of that stuff.
Oh yeah. I definitely got some of that support. It wasn't, completely stoic where nothing came out of him or nothing. We definitely had those moments where what's cool now about it being older is I can talk to him about anything like that now. To where when I was younger, I really didn't know if I wanted to approach him with certain things. Now we've gotten past that and we feel we can talk about anything. And I think going through that as a kid to now being an adult and being able to share him stuff as a father of mine, or me as a father and him as a grandfather, it's gotten to a really good bond.
I will tell you the stories I remember about are Rafael Palmeiro, and the reason I mentioned Palmeiro and Canseco is because I'm guessing that this had something to do with why it is that they chose the path of steroids as well. If you have to be so competitive and winning all the time, but Palmeiro's wife would make it after one time he went 4 for 5 in Wrigley Field off of Dwight Gooden. And his father called him and told him, if you were a real fucking man, you would have hit more than singles. And his wife ended up in a position where she just refused to let her husband answer the phone when her father would call because it would be relentlessly pushing that way. Do you have another story like that one? Or is that the memorable one where you're like, yeah, he made me tougher, but it also scarred me because I would have liked something a little softer there?
Definitely, that's the one specific one I remember for sure.
It's a pretty good one. I didn't think you were going to top that one, but if you have another, if I don't know if it was a perpetual thing, because Palmeiro would also say like his father, he'd hit a double off the fence, and his father would be like on the cage screaming, like on the back of the backstop, screaming at him because he wanted more from him because Tamiami and Flegami are crazy.
Yeah. There was plenty of opportunity, or plenty of times, playing down here at Old Pascual Park and playing against Latino Americano, where those moments did happen. Stuff got competitive and, they wanted to bring certain energy out of the players that they wanted to. But that's the one specific story I remember. I do remember a lot of times my mom just kind of hinting over to him like, hey, let's take it easy a little bit. You know what I mean?
Well, both Palmeiro and Canseco articulated, well, I'm grateful for it. And I thought to myself, okay, you can be grateful for it, but that also seems excessive. Like you might have been able to accomplish some of the same things. There are other ways to do that. Yeah. That's not the only way to get to success. Yeah. But it doesn't sound like you harbor anything in the way of anything other than gratitude for the way that you were raised, pushed, sculpted.
Absolutely. And it's something that I continue to look back on. I'm like, man, I get it now. I understand certain lessons. I understand certain things, why they were handled a certain way. So, yeah, I'm definitely appreciative of it. But at the same time, like we're saying, I want to be the same. And then I want to also take it a step further and understand how to have that line of communication with my son at that age and not wait till, later on in life.
Anything else you want the people to know about Eric's new podcast is Digging Deep. It's part of the Moonball Media empire. He has a new show out every Wednesday. You listen and subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcast. What else would you like people to know about that?
I can't wait to bring a certain perspective, a certain insight to the game. When we say player-driven media, I have a lot of respect for a lot of the media world in baseball and how they cover the game. For now, what I want to do is give that player side, that unique perspective of, hey, this is what I'm seeing throughout the game. This is the way I'm seeing this situation being handled. I think what's unique about my situation as well is it's a company that I'm in on with Anthony Saratelli, my business partner, but there's no restrictions. I get to say what I want to say. I get to explain the way I want to explain it. I don't have to be guarded in a certain way. And that's certain things that everything you've done in your career and the way you've handled certain opportunities, I really admire and look up to because you've done it the way you want to do it. And I think that's the goal of mine, is to continue to do this the way I want to do it and just try and share the game that we all love. And baseball is a game that a lot of people watch daily. And if I can bring my insight or any kind of unique perspective that helps somebody, I want to do that in any way.
Appreciate the time, appreciate the insight, appreciate the perspective, and I will tell the audience, appreciate that throughout your career you were a pillar of professionalism, no matter what those assholes wrote about in San Diego, calling you a clubhouse cancer. I think everybody regards you as somebody who was a pillar of professionalism. So thank you for sharing your story with us here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dan. Appreciate you.
Likewise.